Hello everybody, welcome to Scorcher Toys at anymoon.com's review of Yamato's 1/100 scale VB6 Konig monster. This toy was released December 28th, 2004 for 14,800 yen. It's a pretty bold choice at the time since it hadn't appeared in any animation, just the VFX2 video game. This toy comes with some stickers and an instruction manual. That's it. There's nothing else beyond that. What you see is pretty much what you get. The VB6 comes packaged in shuttle mode, and as you can see, it is pretty plain looking. There's not much in the way of painted on detail. It is just kind of a drab green all the way around. There is some molded in detail that's alright, but overall it's kind of boring looking. It holds together alright, although the legs are really drooping. And there's tabs that hold the legs on. They're the wings of the shuttle right now. And it was very hard for me to kind of get the legs to droop at the same level. So that was annoying. That's why when you look at the legs, you can see some gaps in them. Because I had to adjust things to get them just right. So it would actually hold in a fairly symmetrical way. The other problem I have is the nose cone is extremely droopy. So I'm constantly tapping that up. As far as pet peeves go, you can see there's some big gaps. Never a fan of gaps. So subpar there for sure. So subpar detail. Subpar mold. The front of the shuttle isn't curved down like it should be. In fact, the bottom looks more like how the top should look. So pretty much subpar overall in shuttle mode. There is a gimmick that was very poorly implemented to the point where some of them actually come glued shut. And that is a little missile bay in the back here that you can kind of expose a hinge and then a missile. And that missile has pretty much no detail to it. And again, this is from the VFX2 video game license, and the shuttle in that game would fire weapons from back there. So there's precedent for it. It's just very poorly implemented, and it seems like Yamato kind of aborted the plan to have that gimmick partway through when they realized themselves that it really wasn't turning out very well. Let's take a little bit closer look. There is no canopy or cockpit. You just have some silver painted details like you do on the rest of the nose. That's kind of the only painted on details there to speak of. And again, droopy nose, very frustrating. Should have been a magnet in there or a peg or something. There are no landing gears to speak of, also kind of annoying, but this toy does let you stand it up vertically, which is nice. I've also never seen landing gear line art, so I'm not sure how they are supposed to work if they were. It would have been nice if they included a display stand, but there's, again, just stickers and instruction manuals come with the toy. At 1/100 scale, this toy measures 30.5 centimeters long, roughly. That is in comparison to Bandai's DX offering here. That was 1/108 scale and measures about 27.5 centimeters long. Another point of reference for you. This is a 160 VF1. So you can still see at 1/100 it is bigger than a 160 VF1. So obviously this thing would be gigantic in 160 scale, which is why Yamato went with 1/100. Okay, here we have gear walk mode. I do have a separate high definition transformation guide I very much encourage you to check out, both for instructions on how to get from one mode to the next, but also to see the design elements that actually let you accomplish that. To the right of the toy on your screen, I have quite a few different 1/100 scale or allegedly 1/100 scale toys. So you could see kind of how this toy would display with those other 1/100 scale items. You can see it's quite a bit bigger than the Bandai DX Konig monster off to the left, which again is 1/108 scale. Here's a line art comparison. As you can see, the Yamato toy is really good. Very good likeness to the line art. The arms are perhaps a little bit of the wrong shape. The nose cone underneath is a little large. And the kneecaps are also a little bit large. Yamato actually uses those kneecaps to help prop up the legs. So
Some minor weaknesses there, but overall, Gearwalk looks great, and since that's the most important mode for the VB6, that's a very positive thing. Looking at the actual toy now, the VB6 Konig monster that Bandai has the turret underneath. Yamato gave us this little black turret emulation here that's clearly just kind of a compromise. So it's something, it's there. It is definitely not as good as what Bandai did. Another thing Bandai did that you wouldn't find on the Yamato, Bandai's got this back plate that comes down and acts as a tripod reinforcement. Yamato really doesn't have any gimmicks on their toy. It is exactly what you see is what you get sort of thing. Again, my droopy nose cone working against me here. Like the Bandai toy, there are some gaps in the back that it would have been really neat if something came down and closed those up. But you don't get that, so you kind of have to live with it. But from the front or slight angles, it looks very good. Things kind of do take a step back when you start talking about articulation. Not so much because the toy isn't articulated, but because the toy does such a poor job of holding poses. So, like you're seeing with the nose cone falling down, you also get arms that are wet noodles. So this joint, all of these joints basically don't do anything. So you have to kind of just put the heavy arms against the side of the toy, because that's all you're really going to do. There is a rotation point at the shoulder that is stiff enough to actually do some stuff, hold some poses, but that is about it. The knees and legs are better. Let's get the arms out of the way so we can look at the legs. You have a pivot point right at the top, which is good. So you can get some pretty aggressive stances. You then have the ability to pivot the legs. So if you wanted to get something like a backward stance, you certainly could. You can come forward. The toes, the ankles, let you adjust the angle that you're going for. So if you want to have one leg up and the other leg not so much up, you can get away with these things. Obviously it's going to look funky with what I've got going on, but you can see the toy is a bit of a floppy mess though. So it looks good in a fairly stoic Gearwalk mode. It has the joints to be more fun, but it really doesn't have the structural rigidity or the tightness of joints to really make use of all the pivot points. If it's a floppy mess in Gearwalk mode, you know it's going to be problems in Batroid mode, and of course it is. We'll start with the head. The head can go left and right. It can't pivot up and down. You do have a shoulder joint, which lets you go all the way around. It's a transformation mechanism. Comes in handy. There you go. The arms are still noodles, but if you use the shoulder, you can use kind of just the stiffness you have to actually get some decent arm poses. So that again is when the toy is relatively new. Over time, those arms joints might get a little looser on you and just be completely useless. You do have fingers. They only have one joint right here. You do not have joints beyond that. You also have a thumb. Same idea, just up and down, up and down, up and down. So you got that. You can do limited stuff with the arms, but because again, it's got all this weight to balance, so I guess not entirely surprising how limited that is. The crotch is still dangling on me, kind of frustratingly. And then we get to the really frustrating stuff. You do have a little bit of a hip joint, but it's just a little bit of one. You can get back and forth that much, which is, helpful, but minor. Then you do have the ability to bring the legs out, of course. Transformation mechanisms there. But what you have that is tough is leg joints that are incredibly loose. So what the toy is going to want to do on you is just fall over. So you will definitely be doing a balancing act. Especially if you're trying to do anything at all dynamic, this thing is probably going to topple, as you can see. You do have the ability to move the piece out of the way and go ahead and have a knee. And again, you can kind of, you can see things are falling apart on me. So a peg just came out of the bag. I can bring this thing back together. So just gives you an idea of kind of what handling this toy is like in Batroid mode. Not the most fun. Okay, so you have a knee back, a knee forward. You can try to get somewhat of a running pose going on, but really it's pretty unwieldy. So your best bet is really just to lock the legs all together as if it were in shuttle mode, except vertical. You do have the ability, unlike the Bandai toy, to articulate the toes and bring them back as a heel, which is nice. So once you do that, the toy is not standing on these points here, it's standing on this point there. So that's good. You theoretically can bring the cannons down in Batroid mode, but there's nothing that stops them from falling all the way forward. So you can bring the cannon down, and right now that's good. It stopped where I would have wanted it to stop. But oftentimes it just falls right in front of the face, and that's obviously not a very good look. So you may or may not be able to use that gimmick. Well, it's not really a gimmick, that ability, depending on how stiff your toy is. I only saw the cannons down in Batroid mode at one point in the Frontier movies, and the vehicle would obviously have to be leaning against something to use its cannons in Batroid mode. So hopefully that isn't a feature you really, really wanted, since it's kind of an oddball feature. Alright, here's another scale comparison. You can see a few of the 1/100 toys. This is a Yamato GNU DAO 1/100 toy, or New DAO, sorry about the pronunciation. High metal VF1J and a DX VF25G. You can kind of get a feel for the scale. The Yamato toy clearly towering over the other ones, especially in regard to the cannons. The DX toy just does not have the giant hulking cannons, and they're not leaning over at the same angle as the Yamato toy. Now that might be a difference between the Frontier version of the VB6 and the VFX2 version of the VB6. I don't really have any specific Frontier line art. I don't know if there was some sort of evolution of the VB6 between the two eras that the game and the TV show take place in. So keep that in mind. Personally, the Bandai toy obviously looks much better in many different ways. But again, the things that do work for the Yamato toy, shoulders kind of upright and blockier, the cannons bigger and pointing forward. Those things work together very well for this toy. So those are the positives amongst a sea of negatives. So you can take that away. And again, the Bandai toy sitting on these little flat pieces here instead of on the toes like it's supposed to. Otherwise, the Bandai toy holding together much better, much more stable. So all pluses in its favor. So should you buy a Yamato VB6 Konig monster? The answer is no. You shouldn't. In 2004, the answer might have been a little less clear, but these days it very much looks like the first effort to create a VB6 toy, and that obviously is what it is. Today you can get the Bandai toy, which is clearly a second attempt at creating a VB6. There's definitely room for a third attempt someday, so hopefully we will get that. But in the meantime, while the Yamato toy does some things right that I think the Bandai toy doesn't do, the Bandai toy obviously does many more things right that the Yamato toy does not do. And in the end, the Bandai is the way to go if you want a VB6. Yes, it's smaller, but the scale difference, considering what other companies do at 1/100 scale and playing with that, isn't as big a deal as it might otherwise seem. Durability issue to watch out for. I haven't really had many of those because well, they're kind of hidden. But here is one. There's a peg that goes into this little hole here.
Upon the first transformation, that will be stressed. It might actually even break the plastic there, but it's doesn't seem like that's going to be the end of the world if that does happen. And stress marking all over this toy, that was the #1 complaint. There's a lot of joints. There's a lot of places where you're going to want to put pressure on the toy. And because of that, there's going to be a lot of potential for stress marks. So let's get these legs brought together a little more to make the thing a little less unwieldy. So if all you're looking for is an impressive display piece in Gearwalk mode that you're not going to try to handle, it might still serve that purpose. But even then, you're better off just grabbing the Bandai toy. So a neat piece of history, toy I'm glad to own and think it's kind of fun. But ultimately, it's only for die-hard VB6 collectors.